I had a responsibility of presenting the amendments to the rules. My friends told me I had the easy job. I first would like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Hegedich, Mr. Turlakanov, and Mr. Mamiashvili for their contribution in the Greco-Roman rule amendments, and my colleagues, Mr. Aik, Mr. Fukuda, for helping me in constructing the rule changes for the freestyle. Our mission was to fashion a set of rules that the viewing audience understood. They were more dynamic, yet they provided a level playing field for all the participants and ensured that the best wrestlers prevailed. In addition, it was our challenge to make certain that the two disciplines of wrestling, Greco-Roman and freestyle, were more distinguishable. Following the London Olympic Games, we began to collect ideas and suggestions from the worldwide wrestling community, mostly through the athletes' questionnaire. These eventual changes, I believe, capture this collective wisdom of the worldwide wrestling community. Of course, if in the trial period of these rules, we find that there's unintended consequences, of course we can amend or modify these suggestions. Allow me to make it clear that none of these suggestions is mine. Instead, they are the collective views of the media, spectators, and most important, the best coaches and wrestlers, past and present. My job was to sort through the countless recommendations and sculpture a simpler, more dynamic set of rules. A set of rules that are modern, simpler, and pleasing to the viewing audience. So it was a very difficult task, to say the least. I was surprised at how many common suggestions there were. Yet, as my colleague, Mr. Karelin, pointed out yesterday during the debate, he wasn't surprised because he felt that they represented the rules from the most qualified. I have to agree with him. Let me start with the common views. Cumulative score was preferred to the best of three, although many, our current best of three format, although many saw the merit of the best of three, the cumulative score was preferred. And here's why. Cumulative score incents the wrestlers to score more often and consistently. In addition, or equally important, the total score is easier for the spectators to understand. It's difficult for the spectators, not to mention the athletes. When one wrestler wins the first period 5-0, loses the next two periods 1-0, and loses the match, especially when those two periods result from a ball pull and a punch. The second item that was common among the vast majority of the respondents was that 3 minutes periods with 30-second rest, or 2 3-minute periods with a 30-second rest, was a consensus time frame. The common view was that 2 minutes was not sufficient time to execute the requisite tactics and strategies to provide an exciting match. What's more, it deprives the viewing audience of witnessing the will of the wrestlers. Third, almost everyone agreed that too often weaker wrestlers game the rules by continuously interlocking their fingers or blocking with their head. This does not mean, however, that it was universal or widely agreed that the officials should be given more authority of anointing passivity points. Rather, the consensus was to restore the authority of the officials to incent the wrestlers to take more risk. The onus must be placed on the wrestlers to win the match. Fourth, a predominant number of coaches and wrestlers and fans feel a takedown should be equal to a turn, and both should be worth more than a penalty or a push-out or fleeing the hold point. Last, technical superiority should be rewarded somewhere in the 7 to 10 point range. Let me go through some of the rules without getting so specific that we get lost in the document. Out of bounds is defined more clearly. The first time a wrestler pushes his opponent out of bounds without attempting a maneuver, or if a wrestler inadvertently steps out of bounds, he or she is warned. Subsequent offenses result in a penalty point for fleeing the hold. If a legitimate attempt of a takedown, if in a legitimate attempt of a takedown, the wrestler leaves the mat, then a point is assessed without a warning. If a wrestler finishes a takedown in the process of going out of bounds, the respective points, 2, 3, 4, 5, are given to the wrestler. Scoring. 1 point, of course, for the fleeing the hold, cautions and penalties, or reversals. The reason reversals were included is that many felt that this would incent activity or action in the parterre position. 2 points for parterre turns, or takedowns, or standing defense, tilt, or exposure. 3 points if a wrestler completes a takedown, puts the person in a dangerous position. 5 points, of course, for the classical throws. Again, rein amplitude. If the wrestler is winning, results in the ending of the match. Technical superiority, as I said, would happen at 7 to 10 points. What changes the most and what differentiates the two styles rests with the interpretation of passivity. The role of the referee should be to evaluate and distinguish what is real action from feigned attempts to waste time. First offense is a verbal warning, attention, and now I am talking about the freestyle. Second offense, the action is stopped briefly, one of the wrestlers is warned, and a scoring period, mandatory scoring period begins, 30 seconds, and a light designating which wrestler must score is lighted. In that 30-second time period, the wrestler must score. If he or she doesn't score, then his or her opponent is awarded 1 point. This keeps the responsibility with the wrestlers rather than allowing the officials to anoint the winner. If, in the course of the first period, at the end of 2 minutes, no points are scored, the referees, in concert, must decide between the two wrestlers which is the least active. That wrestler then go through that same procedure. What this accomplishes, if it's included with the criteria that we currently use, including last to score, there never will be a referee's decision. There never will be a flip of the coin. There never will be an overtime. And most importantly, there'll never be a ball pull or a clinch. Something that I believe everyone wanted to, or the largest majority of the people, I should say, wanted to accomplish. The two areas where we discussed, and there were some common views, we were unable to come to a consensus among our FILA girls, and the debate will continue. And that is whether or not to use a one-day format and how many wrestlers to separate before the beginning of the competition. Let me say that the debate centers around whether we should separate two wrestlers, the number 1 and number 2 from the previous year's World Championship, or whether we should separate all of the medalists. It's a complicated debate because we know that diversity in our sport is important, and the ability for the developing countries to have an opportunity to medal must be taken into account. The 1-day or the 2-day format, however, even though we didn't come to a consensus on the 1 or 2-day format, we did come to a consensus on beginning the competition earlier. Some of that will depend upon how many of the entries, but it was suggested to start at 11 a.m. as opposed to the current 1 p.m. and try to have 2 separate sessions. Let me try to explain. The majority of those changes would be the same changes that the Greco-Roman wrestlers committee were also suggesting. The only difference or the main difference lies in their interpretation, how they wish to begin viewing passivity. First violation is a warning. Second, results in the wrestler being cautioned and chooses between either parterre or standing position. The third violation is a technical point, and the guilty wrestler also has the choice of selecting parterre or standing. The fourth passivity, the bout is terminated. A bout ending in 0-0, the victory is awarded to the wrestler who was last to be judged most active. The Greco-Roman Working Committee would like to ensure that during the time frame of the match, at least the referees must choose once, if not more, which of the wrestlers is least active. So in the Greco-Roman, there also wouldn't be any overtime. There wouldn't be any flip of the coin. There wouldn't be any ball pulls. Rather, it would be decided and more authority would be put into the hands of the officials. The other difference, but the other difference is that the matches would end with a 7-point difference, where in the freestyle, it was a 10-point difference. And part of that reason for being a lesser number is that in the freestyle, if we are agreed to go to a 2-point takedown, then that would, of course, make it easier to score the 10-point difference, given the extra amount of points that are given for the takedown. So, with that, let me say, in conclusion, these ideas were thoughtful and constructive that we received over the course of the last year. Supporting statistics were woven into most of the arguments and considered in the deliberations. And as with any rule changes, much of the success depends on the interpretation and implementation of the referees. So, if it goes wrong, we're going to blame the referees. That was a joke. but it may be the case. So, with that, I think hopefully, it's broad enough that everyone understands the concept. Hopefully, we reach our goal of making it more dynamic, simpler, easier for the spectators to understand, and most importantly, it remains and ensures that the best athletes prevail. So, let me open it to questions. But if there are no questions, we can move on. because there could be a lot of questions. I'm sure that as we attempt to use these, I think the next question probably comes, and we discussed this at length, was when will these be implemented? When will the new rules start? The answer to that is tomorrow. So it was decided after a long debate that why are we prolonging this? It'll be a huge challenge to educate all the coaches, all the athletes, and all the referees. But I think Mr. Karelin and myself in this debate both came to the agreement that if a wrestler is prepared today to wrestle the best of 3 2-minute matches, or a total of 6 minutes, he's better prepared to take down his wrestler than his opponent. His opponent is unable to take him down. He's able to turn his opponent is unable to turn him, and he stays in the middle of the match. The rules shouldn't matter. He should prevail as the best wrestler. And that continues today. There's just more incentive for that wrestler to score earlier and more often with a cumulative score. So if there are no other questions, good. Go ahead. Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification on the Greco rules concerning the 0-0 fouls. Because I know this is a small matter, but anyhow, when we're talking about the audience understanding our rules. So if you and me have a match in 0-0 and you are passing 2 times in the first period, and I'm passing 1 time in the last period, maybe it could be difficult for the audience understanding that you were penalized twice, I was penalized once. And still the other guy wins. So maybe you should look at how many cautions did you get before you look at who was cautioned the last one. If I understand it.
Well, I think if one wrestler was cautioned twice,
points yet. Only
no
the third.
points yet.
The third gave points, but not the 2 first ones. As I read the rules.
Correct. I will defer the question to my Greco-Roman colleagues who compiled the Greco-Roman rules.
I understand that when we're talking about the last point, that's easy. But now it's the last caution. And if you were cautioned twice,
Misha, as you deliberated your rules, did you contemplate that idea?
Ну, я надеюсь, Стэн, во-первых, я надеюсь, что наши уважаемые коллеги, большинство из них, самые профессиональные тренеры и великие спортсмены, они будут готовить спортсменов так, что за 6 минут подготовленные спортсмены, имея такие возможности, обязательно будут делать физические действия. Для начала. Второе, я думаю, что по ходу схватки борцов, определяя активность или пассивность, судья четко будет определять данные оценки. И на табло данная оценка будет определена. Поэтому зритель будет видеть борец пассивный, получил одно или 2, или 3 предупреждения, чего схватка заканчивается. Поэтому я не вижу проблем для зрителя. Зритель будет видеть динамику схватки, будет видеть оценку и, конечно, результат.